Hi guys, it's Summer here. I'm back with the third and final video in the books I read in 2020 trilogy video words. The first video in this series was me talking about the books that I disliked that I read in 2020. I will link that down below, and I will also link the second video, which were the books that were just sort of in between for me. I didn't really care about them, they were just kind of there. They weren't the best, they weren't the worst. They just went along a line and there were no ups or downs, they were just there. This video, as you can probably tell from the title, is my favourite books of 2020. I have 15 books to talk to you about today, and I don't know if I have a lot to say about them, but I'm gonna try. Okay, so the first 6 books I read were actually the Death Note mangas, and I'm not holding them up while I talk. I enjoyed like the first half of this series moderately, and it was great, it was cool, like they had good characters, the relationship between the good guy and the bad guy was just like amazing. And then like towards the end of the series something happened, obviously can't say because of spoilers, but something big happened and it was just like, oh, I just hated it, okay? This follows a boy called Light Yagami, who is an ace student but he's bored out of his mind, until one day he finds this notebook that belongs to a Shinigami death god, and any human whose name is written in this book dies. And Light is like, you know what I'm gonna do with this? I'm gonna start killing all the criminals, and I'm gonna rid the world of evil, because I have a notebook that I can do that with. Essentially we're following the antagonist, who is Light, as he just murders people with this notebook, thinking he's on this like righteous path of ridding the world of evil, and you kind of see like the point he has, like you see his point of view and you understand like where he has that logic of like, oh, I kill all the criminals, I'll kill the people who I see doing bad things, but at the same time it's like, yeah, but like you're murdering all these people, so stop it. I'm not like a huge fan of comic books and, you know, that kind of style, like mangas, pictures and stuff, but I dislike anime even more than I dislike manga, so I decided I was going to read the manga for it because it was a story that interested me and I did really enjoy it. People who are hunting down Light and his relationship with those people, how the brains work and how you see them try to outsmart each other. It was just really satisfying to watch, and it was just good. But like I said, this thing happened in like maybe the last 2 volumes. Essentially a character died, and I felt like that character dying kind of took away like the brilliance of the series. There was just no point after that. I didn't care anymore. So I probably should have put like the last 2 volumes in one of my other videos, but I didn't think that far ahead because I'm an idiot. The next book I had to talk about is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. This follows a 15-year-old autistic boy called Christopher, as one day he finds his neighbour's dog speared on a pitchfork in his neighbour's garden, and he decides that he's going to try and solve the mystery of who murdered the dog. But along the way he ends up uncovering some other things that lead to the rest of the plot. I just thought it was written really well, and it really captured like the voice of this boy, this like autistic boy called Christopher. I don't know, it was just great. But like I wasn't actually entirely sold on the ending, so this is mainly my favourite books of 2020 because of the way it was written as opposed to the actual like plot of the book, because I didn't really like the ending. It was a very realistic ending, but I didn't want a realistic ending, I wanted something like happier than that. So it was a good book and I would really recommend picking it up, and I thought all the characters in it were good. I really didn't like Christopher's dad and you should read it, and that is all I have to say. Moving to the side, I need room to insert a picture. The next book I actually read on audiobook, and that was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Casey. Casey? Do we care? No. I really enjoyed this book actually, which is surprising because it essentially follows a bunch of awful characters in an awful situation, saying awful things and being kind of awful people. But it was good because I think that was what the story was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed, I'm not sure it's specifically supposed to make you like think these characters were good people. It was just a story about bad people in a bad situation. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest follows an Indian man called the Chief, who is in a mental hospital, and it essentially follows him watching as this new patient called McMurphy arrives at the hospital and starts to disrupt the nurses' routines. It has a lot of like sexism and like sexual assault references and all this other stuff that you just kind of, you know, you don't want to unpack it if that's not your thing. But I just thought it was like a very interesting read to follow all these characters struggling with mental illnesses, and also seeing the chief's own kind of delusions and just like how the story played out. But I just thought it was a very interesting book to read, and I would recommend it. But, you know, like I said, it's set in a mental hospital around mentally ill characters, okay? Like, you can't expect it not to deal with all this gross, horrible stuff, you know? Like, traumatic things. I don't know how to, like, express my feelings about this book, but I just thought it was very interesting to read. The next book was actually a reread, and that was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I actually listened to it on audiobook, but I have a physical copy here that's falling apart. And this is honestly one of my favourite books of all time. Just because I love the way it's a classic, but it's not such a classic that it's like unreadable. This follows a girl called Scout who lives in this town in Alabama, I think, that's steeped in prejudice against, you know, literally just anything that's not white and normal, you know, normal. Her father is a lawyer who has been hired to defend a black man who was charged with the rape of a white girl. And this essentially just follows Scout's journey as she watches her father face the consequences of this, and she sees the town like react to this. It also has a lot of subplots that have the same example of like how ridiculous like first opinions can be and prejudices can be, and how you shouldn't just believe like the first thing people tell you. It has lots of like smaller examples, which is what I thought was so great about this book, is because you have so many examples that not only cater to like big issues, as in like the racism the town has, but also like smaller issues that like a child could understand if they had this book read to them. So many other examples of how the prejudices in the town are ridiculous, as opposed to just this one example. And I thought that was what made the book so great. Not to mention, it was just a fun book to read in general. Like seeing through Scout's eyes, seeing through this child's eyes, and her not understanding why people were prejudiced. And then also her going, oh, that thing's scary. You know, because children just do that. They're just like, oh, look at that thing over there. It's scary. I don't like that. People say that this person has killed someone, so they must have killed someone, you know. And then her realising that, oh, hang on, maybe they didn't actually kill someone, and maybe the townspeople are stupid. Yeah, literally just read it. I think it's a great book. That's all I have to say about it. It's a great book. You should read it. It's fun, even if you don't pay attention to like all the messages in it. And if you do want to pay attention to the messages in it, then they're good messages. And I just thought it was a good book, and I will never not recommend it to people. I've been staring over there too much. The next book I read was Kim Ji-young, born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju. This is translated from Korean, and it follows Kim Ji-young throughout her life and the experiences she has with like sexism in Korea, and how all the dudes are just like ridiculous. I just picked this book up because it was Korean, I'm not gonna lie. I can feel everyone judging me and thinking I'm a Korea boo, but that's fine. But it wasn't like a bad read. I'm just not like a particularly activistic person when it comes to feminism. It's not that like I say I'm not a feminist, because obviously like I believe everyone should have equal rights. It's kind of stupid not to give people equal rights and shit. But it's like I feel there's some people who are feminists who just take it like to a ridiculously far level where they want to be higher than men, and that's not the point of wanting equal rights. And they piss me off, so I just distance myself from like feministic things. Because it's like, dude, you're asking for equal rights. Like, I'm not saying don't like defend yourself against the dudes who are dicks, but saying all men should die is just a little over the top to me. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not that into feminism because some feminists piss me off, and I'm a woman, so that's saying something. I just thought it was an interesting book to read. I just saw it in the local bookshop when I went there, and I picked it up and I read the back, and it sounded interesting. I didn't realise it was about feminism by what it says on the back. I mean, it's a very short book, so it just kind of follows like little incidents throughout her life, and I will say I thought the ending was like genius. It was like, mwah. I was like, oh my god, that is such a man thing to do. I was just like, I could not believe the audacity. I couldn't believe it. The audacity that that dude had at the end, that the therapist had at the end, and I was like, oh my god, like, he's an idiot. So yeah, I would recommend this, even if you're not that into feminism and stuff. I find it just interesting to read in general. and then the thing at the end was just like, oh my god. Yeah, Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju. Next we have Misery by Stephen King, which I did listen to on audiobook just simply because I struggle reading Stephen King books because there's just something about the way he writes that annoys me. I enjoy listening to the audiobooks, it's just when I sit down to go and read his stuff, I just end up like distracted. Misery follows a writer called Paul Sheldon when one day he ends up in a car crash and he skids off the road in like a snowstorm, I think, and his number one fan, Annie Wilkes, saves him. And she takes him back to her house, and she turns out to be a little bit insane. And she keeps him hostage there. Yes. I thought this book was probably one of my favourite Stephen King books to read. I did really like it, but it was just kind of really long, and there was like that weird child orgy at the end, and I was just like, no. So this was a lot better, and I thought it was a lot more interesting to me because I want to become a writer. But well, do I want to become a writer now? I don't know. I don't really fancy being kidnapped by my number one fan. It doesn't sound like the dream vacation. But I mean, there's not much I can say about this apart from the fact that I enjoyed it. I thought the plot was good. It pretty much centred around Paul being stuck in her house because his legs were broken by the car crash, so he couldn't run away, and he was in a wheelchair and she'd take care of him and she drugged him up. It just centred around those two in the house and him trying to like get people's attention because Annie lived in the middle of nowhere, kind of, you know, she was like far away from the town, so it was rare that people kind of drove up there. It just followed him as he tried to find ways to get away. Like, it was good and it had suspense and all that stuff you want in a horror book, and it was not ridiculously long, although it did have that Stephen King classic characters that you don't really like because they're kind of all assholes. Paul was just kind of a dude and Annie was obviously insane. The next two books I have to talk about are The Magic of Oz and Glinda of Oz by L. Frank Baum. These are two books in the Wizard of Oz series. They just follow the adventures of characters in Oz after the events of the Wizard of Oz. And they're just fun stories. I'm not going to summarise both of them, but they're fun, and I used to listen to them on audiobook all the time. I got them on Audible and I listened to those too. And yeah, they're just fun stories. But I will say, I think the characters are like really irritating. It's like that annoyingness that accompanies like some kids' book characters, especially like old kids' book characters. Not like such modern day characters, but like older ones, it's just strange, they're so irritating. The Scarecrow is so bloody full of himself, I swear to God, just because he got a brain. And the Tin Woodman's like, oh my god, I have a heart so I can love better than you guys. And the Lion's like, oh my god, I'm braver than everyone else. And just shut up. And then there's this like glass cat who thinks she's prettier than everyone else and she's really vain and annoying. Why is this on my favourite books video, you may ask? Because nostalgia. But no, I did enjoy listening to them, but like if I look at it critically then I start to get annoyed with all the characters. The next book I read was Wayward Sun by Rainbow Rowell. This is the second book in a series. I assume it's going to be a series, maybe a trilogy. The first book is Carry On, and it's kind of just like gay Hogwarts. Like, so if Harry and Malfoy were gay. So the first book, which I read last year, like 2 years ago, but essentially, like I said, gay Harry Potter. It follows this boy called Simon, who is the chosen one, and he's like destined to defeat this thing called the Insidious Humdrum, which is something that's eating up the magic from the world, if I remember correctly. If I don't, then sorry, but... And there's this character called Baz. He's kind of the Draco Malfoy of the series. Sue me for comparing it to Harry Potter, but it's like gay Harry Potter, okay? It's British. I mean, it's got more swearing in than Harry Potter. And it's definitely just a funner thing to read. Like, it's just such a fun... They're just fun books to read. Like, the gay and the fun, and the gay and the fun, and the gay and the fun. And the way they talk, and it's just so British. Anyway, that's what the first book follows. In the second book, it just basically follows, like, after the events of the first book, and it follows as the friend group from the first book go on a road trip to America. This book wasn't as good as the first one. In fact, I think the first one could have been a very good standalone novel, but, you know, when you can write about gay Hogwarts, you write about gay Hogwarts, you know. I watched a review for this where someone said that they actually felt like this was kind of like a build-up to the next book. I actually agree, because there wasn't a whole lot going on in this, but I was really frustrated with the ending, and then there was just so much like gay relationship issues going on, and it just frustrated me so much. But I read it in like one night or something, after like having not been able to read anything for ages. They're such fast reads, and they're just so good to read. Like, they may not be the best books in the world, and the plots may not be great, but they're just fun. And I love Baz, and I love Simon, and that's it. Okay, the last books I have to talk about, I have kind of mixed feelings for them, to be honest, because they're just kind of... I read the first book, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, on audiobook, and I'm not gonna lie, I was texting a lot while listening to the audiobook, so I don't actually remember a whole lot of what happened in the first book. All I know is I enjoyed it enough to read the second book. The second book, I absolutely loved it, although I wasn't entirely sold on the ending. Not because of like what happened, it's just the endings are so rushed in the second two books. Queen of Nothing, which is the last book, and then The Wicked King. The Wicked King was my favourite book, and I thought the ending, while it was a bit rushed, it still felt satisfying to me. Queen of Nothing, the ending was just, like, this is the ending to an entire trilogy, like the end of the story, you know? It sucked. Like, it wasn't like what happened that sucked, it's just the way it was written. It was like there was this huge build-up to a battle. It like ended within like 2 pages, like 2 pages of a battle after this book building up. Like, no, okay, give me more. This trilogy follows a character called Jude, who, when she was very young, she saw her parents get murdered, and her sisters were taken away to Fairyland to live there. The first book, from what I can remember, centres around how Jude desperately wants to fit into Fairyland. Despite like the circumstances that brought her there, she now desperately wants to prove herself, and she wants to become a knight. And this story essentially follows as through her trying to prove herself, she like discovers that there's a plot to overthrow the throne. It's got like hot fairies in, okay? It's like a really lame summary, but hot fairies, like listen, hot fairies. My major issue, like the reason I have a love-hate relationship with this series, is Cardan, who is one of the princes. And he's like Jude's enemy, but like, you know, it's one of those like enemies to lovers things. But like, he is literally the worst to her in the first book. Like, he's literally like abusive and horrible. Like, I get it, he's a traumatised child and what, but no, that doesn't excuse it. Like, he's still being a prick. He like tried to drown her at one point, I think. You get my point? But then, you see, like from what I can remember, I may have got it completely wrong because I love Cardan as much as I hate him. I may just be justifying an abusive bastard. I don't know if I should like put this as spoilers, so like slight spoilers I guess, but it's kind of like obvious how the character arcs are gonna go. No, in the second book and the third book, Cardan kind of like, you know, he becomes a better guy, or he stops being a dick. In most books with abusive relationships, or like, you know, an abusive dude who then becomes like nice to the woman, it's usually like he becomes good for her, like I'm good only because I'm dating you. But I kind of felt, and I may be remembering completely wrong, that Cardan became good more because he was inspired to, as opposed to doing it simply because Jude didn't want him to. So I feel like it was like he actually had like an arc where he became a good person. I still don't think that they should have ended up together. Because it's still like, oh, he did all this stuff to you, and like he tried to drown you and like all this crap, and now you're like having sex with him. I don't care if he's become a good person. I feel like this might be a bit unhealthy. But you know, if Jude wants to, then whatever. Like, she lives in a fairyland. I'll excuse it. But like, that's my kind of like defense as to why I like him. If I haven't remembered correctly, then piss off. But again, these were quite quick reads. They were very fun. Well, they were dark, but they were just like quick reads. But I just cannot express my frustration with how it ended. Just like the rushedness of the battle. It was so unsatisfying. It was just like, oh, a fight. Oh, it's over. Crap. But that being said, I did still by How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, and that essentially follows Cardan throughout his childhood, or like certain events in his childhood. It was just interesting to read, it was cute to read, and it had like really good illustrations. So yeah, like I have very mixed feelings about this and how it played out. But overall, it was just fun to read if I didn't look at it too critically. I really loved the way whoever became the King of Elfhame was linked to the land. I really liked that aspect of it. So that's all the books I read in 2020, spread out across 3 videos. Yeah, that's the end of the video. Bye.